joining us now in studio and perhaps celebrating a bit is Jeremy Salton, advisor for the New Right Party, and or Yamina, as it's called, and political strategist. Jeremy, congratulations. I don't know if that means you might be getting into the Knesset if it's at 19 seats.
Yeah, I mean, it was 18 last time. And,
there you go. Okay.
So yes, that's a nice poll for me personally.
Right.
But what I think this poll does is it shows that there's a very, very clear exit of right-wing voters leaving Likud and joining Yamina. And I think the reason for that is that there are two things that this government was supposed to do. One was to apply Israeli sovereignty. The second was to fight the coronavirus. Well, this government hasn't done either.
Right. Now, let's take a look at that poll. Let's imagine those are the polling results. On one hand, as we said, the right-wing religious parties would have a clear majority of 63, but there might be a wrinkle there. Naftali Bennett, your party leader, who stood staunchly by Benjamin Netanyahu through 3 elections, only to find himself, let's say, locked out of the government in this round, has said this time around he's not certain he would support Benjamin Netanyahu. What are the possible options for Yamina if it emerges from the next election with that kind of percentage in the parliament?
Well, again, we need to see what the actual results are, right? That's a snapshot of today. If we're seeing a similar...
Right, let's say a similar.
Yeah, if we see a similar situation, I'm pretty sure that the first phone call Benjamin Netanyahu is going to make is going to be to Naftali Bennett. Now, whether Naftali Bennett decides to answer that call or not is obviously up to him, but I think that Netanyahu might now be looking backwards and wondering if maybe he should have acted a bit differently considering where he is today.
You say the first phone call would be, I mean, I'm asking you about, are there potential for Yamina outside the Likud, even if it's headed by Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think Naftali has been very clear. He said we're not in Netanyahu's pocket. We're not going to go ahead and, as we've seen in previous elections, go ahead and be part of the so-called right-wing bloc. It was Prime Minister Netanyahu's decision to go ahead and break up that bloc. In terms of who the possible prime minister candidates are going to be, look, Kalev, it's not out of the question if this trend continues. It could be Naftali Bennett who is possibly forming a government if we see this continue.
I'm curious to say, Naftali Bennett forming a government. I mean, even in that poll, it's hard to project that it would be higher than Likud. Are you saying you feel it's possible? And I'm asking you as a political strategist, not someone aligned with Yamina, that Yamina could emerge as the most powerful party in parliament?
Strictly as a political strategist and someone who's studied history, we have to go ahead and look at what we've seen. Labor created the country. They're down at 3 seats right now.
And they vanish in that poll.
And they vanish in this poll. The National Religious Party that even predates the state does not pass the threshold in this poll. Blue and White, when it was created, it came out of thin air and took 35 seats in its first election of existence. So yeah, I think what we see is an exit from the usual Israeli concept of rallying around a party. Instead, what we see is people going ahead and consolidating themselves around people. When Naftali Bennett has shown throughout this coronavirus, both in the first wave when he was part of the government, and then, of course, the shadow corona cabinet that he put together as part of the opposition, is that this is a leader. This is a guy who actually has plans and knows what to do. I go back to what this government was supposed to do. They failed on sovereignty. They failed on the issue of the coronavirus. That was the entire idea of this national unity government. What are we doing here, Kalev?
Right. Let me ask you, the Yesh Atid party, in the first poll we saw, also at 19 seats, sort of also rising, benefiting. Now, clearly, Yamina and Yesh Atid have very different agenda on a lot of issues, but it has been noted on certain issues, let's say, outside foreign policy, certainly, for example, Yair Lapid of Naftali Bennett do share certain values, certain interests. Is that a possible alliance that could lead to a new government, in your view?
Well, I'm, of course, not going to go ahead and conduct coalition negotiations.
No, I'm not asking you.
But you're asking, is that a possibility?
Is that
something that I would rule out? I would not rule that out. I think that's one of many, many possibilities. If we're looking at a situation where Yamina is theoretically the largest party, you have to go ahead and have a very broad vision in terms of seeing what type of coalition making would have to go forward in order to form a government, because look, we had 3 elections because it is very, very, very hard to get to 61. And the business of going ahead and ruling out parties to start with, even before you've gone ahead and reached Election Day, is generally not something that has helped anybody form a government.
Right. Let's keep in mind, polls are not results at the ballot box, not yet. But still, Naftali Bennett from 0 to 19 in that poll, that is quite something. Jeremy Salton, thanks for joining us
Thank you.
On the Rundown.